So Tolkien and Lewis's friendship is really well known. They got to know each other as Oxford Dons and they had a close relationship. But did you know they actually weren't close friends their entire lives? And by the time that Lewis died, Tolkien did not consider him a close friend anymore. So what happened that broke the friendship between these two legendary individuals? The reason I'm talking about this is because I read Tolkien's letters and C.S. Lewis's autobiography, and I made a few interesting observations about their friendship. The first observation is that the admiration and respect went one way. Lewis had a lot of respect and admiration for Tolkien, but Tolkien did not reciprocate that admiration and respect. Tolkien was very instrumental in Lewis's conversion to Christianity, so that's a really significant factor. Also, Tolkien didn't really like hardly anything that Lewis wrote, whereas Lewis liked a lot of what Tolkien wrote. Just as a comparison, here's what Lewis said about Lord of the Rings. "The Fellowship of the Ring is like lightning from a clear sky. Here are beauties which pierce like swords or burn like cold iron. Here is a book that will break your heart." And here is Tolkien talking about Narnia. "It is sad that Narnia and all that part of C.S. Lewis's work should remain outside the range of my sympathy." And that was pretty much all he had to say about Narnia. He just really didn't like it. Tolkien also kind of looked down on C.S. Lewis's popular level theology. He didn't think super highly of it. Here's another interesting quote from Tolkien about Lewis. "But Lewis was a very impressionable man, and this was abetted by his great generosity and capacity for friendship. The unpayable debt that I owe to him was not influence, as it is ordinarily understood, but sheer encouragement." So in reading Tolkien's letters and reading C.S. Lewis's autobiography, it became pretty obvious that there was a lot of unequal respected admiration between Lewis and Tolkien. Lewis greatly respected and admired Tolkien. Tolkien didn't have the same level of respect and admiration for Lewis. And this, I think, got to Lewis after a while. Say you're close friends with someone and you really like the stuff that they write, but they don't have the same level of interest in what you're writing. That's going to get to you after a while. So I think that this unequal level of admiration was actually a huge part of Lewis and Tolkien's drifting away from each other. And Tolkien points out a few other reasons. "Yes, C.S. Lewis was my closest friend from about 1927 to 1940 and remained very dear to me. His death was a grievous blow, but in fact we saw less and less of one another after he came under the dominant influence of Charles Williams, and still less after his strange marriage." When Lewis married Joy, he actually didn't tell his buddies. And from a few quotes in Tolkien's letters, Tolkien was a little bitter about that and hurt. Like, why would you get married and then like not tell your close friend? And so Tolkien was a little bitter about that. And then Charles Williams was a very strong personality, kind of ended up replacing Tolkien as Lewis's close literary buddy. But I don't think Charles Williams was the main reason. I think that this unequal level of admiration between the two made Lewis a little bitter. And then he hid his marriage from Tolkien. And so Tolkien got bitter about that. And I think that they just ended up drifting apart for those reasons, which is super unfortunate because they were obviously famously good buddies. They were close friends for many years. And it is unfortunate that they drifted apart like that. Here's a letter that Tolkien wrote after Lewis's death. "Many people still regard me as one of his intimates. Alas, that ceased to be so some 10 years ago. We were separated first by the sudden apparition of Charles Williams and then by his marriage, of which he never even told me. I learned of it long after the event. But we owed each a great debt to the other, and that tie with the deep affection that it begot remains." So even though Tolkien and Lewis drifted apart over the years, the impact that they had was never lost. That's all I have for you today. Hit the button, hit the bell. Catch you later.